I think what we're going to do now is we're going to close the session, and I feel a little underprepared for this, but I think we're going to wing it, and this is the moment where we get to begin to transition out of having folks up here talking at you to all of us talking together more collectively. Do you want to say something? No. I think we should proceed with all right. Okay, so what we're going to do for about the next 20 minutes, give or take a few, is ask you to interact with one another, and we're going to ask you to share out as an audience as a whole. So we called this Crucial Conversations, and I think we're moving into the part of this convening that are crucial conversations. So what I'm going to ask you all to do now is to stand up, stretch if you need to. So look around, and what I'd like you to do is get into a group of 3 to 5 people, ideally people who you have not talked to yet during the last day and a half. So go ahead and do that. No. Okay, so now if you're in your groups, if you haven't done it already, please introduce yourself, say where you're from, and maybe the name of your operation or what organization you're here representing. And I'm going to have Anne ask the first question. What you're going to do is you're going to give each of the folks in your group about 30 seconds to a minute to respond. If you're not the person speaking, please just be quiet and listen and make sure that everybody in the group has an opportunity to respond.
So also, if you can pick somebody, you can figure out who's the extrovert in the group that might be willing to report back to the larger group. And if someone can take notes so that we can share across tables. But the questions, the question you're going to be answering is, what are some key learnings or insights you've had that you've gained from the presentations over the last 2 days? And how are you going to take what you've learned here back into your families and your communities? Okay?
Say it one more time.
So again, the question is, what are the key learnings or insights you've had from what you've heard over the last 2 days, and how are you going to bring what you've learned back into your families and your communities and your businesses?
As part of the Grow the Growers program, I have the ability to reach out to other people.
You've got 5 minutes, more or less. Okay, if I can have everybody's attention up here again. What we're going to do now is we would like to hear back from your groups how you responded to this question. So, what did you learn? What was your takeaway? What are you going to do with it when you get back? Who'd like to share?
All right, we got somebody over here.
Got one here. Okay, we're going to start over here, and then we'll make our way across.
All right. Our group came up with the following. Important was the mentorship program and the NAP. So important for just the energy and for everything that's going on here and for our future. Then the topic of the microbiome and its relations to soil, our human gut, and how it addresses concerns and issues we have, or so many people have, with what's happening in our gut. Issues of mental health and personal experiences that people at the table had with ranchers, families, friends, farmers, that had mental health concerns. The topic of phytonutrients, how to apply them on the farm, in pastures, and in more efficient ways. Then just a chance to be visiting here and to maybe support Quivira in the future, but also to meet people, to meet young people, see how young people are motivated, fighting back, taking over, and are our future. And maybe are also a good invitation for all of us to donate to the organization. And then the ongoing learning that we observe here, the excitement, the continuity that we're all together creating with the beautiful presentations and the very important topics that are being brought to us.
Okay, we're going to go to this side of the room.
Our group was talking a lot about how much everyone appreciated the focus on building community and improving communication. Having a network of support and building a strong community of support knowledge, everyone felt was really vital to the regenerative community. And so they appreciated getting a better lens of the human element of regenerative agriculture and how we need to lift that up and incorporate it into programming. We also talked about some production management practices and the things like that were really innovative to a lot of the group, things like enterprise stacking and end herding and building soil health and the idea of needing to foster and steward microorganism community development. I personally have been really impressed, and one of my biggest takeaways is that I wish I could come and present to New Mexico audiences more regularly. It's hard to sit at an equity panel sometimes, and we received overwhelming positive response after the break, and that's a really nice change from some of the rooms that we're in, so thank you.
Okay, Sarah, we got
Thank
another
you.
one here.
In the middle of the room.
Hi, so it was pretty clear there was 4 C's or 5 that came out of our conversation here. What we're doing takes courage, and that courage we have to bring back to our community to communicate clearly what we're doing here. We've been at the James Ranch doing this for over 30 years, and it's really tough to get, to stand out in the field and be, not ridiculed, but like, what are they doing? And we're seeing that change now, and it's taken a lot of courage and community and commitment, and it's clear that these folks are in the same position, because it takes so many connections within your community, and so that's kind of something that's been clear in our little conversation, that there's a lot of C's going on here, but the connections, the commitment, the courage, communication, and community are all the big things for us.
Thank you. Maybe we'll take 2 more.
Some of the things that stood out for our group here was the importance of connecting with the indigenous footprint and understanding what that was like on the landscape. Listening better was another point that stood out. Appreciating the role of the on-the-ground practitioners and the evidence that they shared and what they are doing and the changes that they're seeing on the landscape. Interconnection and learning how to share the ideas that we discussed in these workshops and the conference here, and how to take those out and share those with others who are less familiar with these ideas, and connecting. Understanding the young generation and the role that they have, particularly with the NAP program. And the last is the need to not be intimidated by lack of experience, to get out and be curious and ask questions.
So our group was pretty invigorated and edified by just the traction that regenerative agriculture has gained since like the early 2000s. We've been impressed by just the scope of topics mentioned here in a very interdisciplinary take on all the ways to look at regenerative ag. We're also reminded that there's a lot of work to do. It's a good thing to feel really connected and excited when we're here, but we do still have a lot to do when we go home. Definitely the community element has been really important to us. We also talked about incorporating ranching into natural resource management. And then, let's see, what else? I think that was really our take on it, yeah.
Actually, I'm going to take one more. So how about this table at the back there? Your hand's up. Yep.
One of the things that we talked about in our small group, and one of the things I'm constantly reminded of when I come to events like this, is when we talk about holistic management, oftentimes we refer to our ranch practices or our natural resource management. And when you go through HMI schooling, the first thing that you start with is the management of your own whole and how personal those things are, and how you have to come face to face with it. And so we were talking in our group how grateful we were that these intimate things come up in conversation. And one of the things that Chrissy brought up was how it's a continual learning process. And the biggest thing, I think one of the biggest things that we can take from this is how it teaches us to advocate for ourselves. Oftentimes, a lot of us are good at standing up for others and speaking up for others, but when it comes to our own time and our own feet on the ground, we kind of forget about ourselves, and I think we do ourselves a disservice in that regard. And in speaking to Dana as well, learning to include herself in those lessons and in that understanding of the whole. So we're grateful to be in this space.
Thank you. So I was going to have everybody switch groups and do another round of conversation, but I think for the sake of time, I'm going to ask our second question and just ask you all to think about it for about 30 seconds, and then we'll open it up to anybody who wants to respond. So the second question is, what are we not talking about that we need to be talking about?
One of the things I think that this conference would benefit from would be including the voices of conventional agrarians as well. I feel that it's easy to get caught in a situation where you're kind of reiterating information that people agree with, but at the end of the day, I feel like both voices from both worlds would benefit from each other coming together and actually hashing it out and discussing solutions and information from both sides. So I guess maybe that's something that we're not really discussing, is maybe the perspectives of people that are more reliant on conventional practice.
Let's see. I see a hand here, and I'm gonna go here, and then I'll come over here.
Carrie, got one right there, and then we'll go.
Okay, at the back first, and then we'll come up here.
Hello. I would have appreciated hearing the voices from immigrant farm workers and also our elderly farmers, especially our Hopi, Navajo, Pueblo, and Hispanic farmers.
I would like to hear more about how we're going to affect change in policy. You know, we talk amongst ourselves a lot, and we have managed to spread the word, but we have to work from this level up to really change the whole outlook of the nation. So I just want more policy discussion.
See, I see a hand here. We'll go here. And whoever, Jillian, you want to go next?
I would like to hear from like farmers that I represent, older African American farmers that are in Mississippi and the Carolinas that are still struggling to keep their land, and also focus on bankruptcy protection, because a lot of farmers are filing bankruptcy like crazy, and it affects small farms, large farms, mid-sized farms, and so I think that there needs to be more education for ranchers and farmers when it comes to bankruptcy protection and using that as an option to save the farm.
Thank you. We've got one in the middle of the room here.
One of the things that our family ranch has to deal with a lot is talking to our customers about some of the things that, in our opinions, are fads, like nitrites and nitrites being really bad and all these things. I wonder if we could possibly have a speaker that has studied kind of the hot button topics as far as health of our food that people are not educated on, that we know often is incorrect, but it's so hard for an individual to find the scientific studies that verify what we know, or maybe don't. And that's one of the things I love about Quivira is we have these amazingly smart scientists come and speak on those topics that we have a hard time talking to our customers about.
Thank you. Let's see. We have. I wish we could have this conversation for an hour because it's really fascinating, and I hope that you will continue to have it amongst yourselves. I hope you'll continue to share it with Carrie and Anne and myself. I would really like to hear what you all want to hear up here on stage and what conversations you want to be having that we're not having. It's been amazing to have you all here. We're going to shift gears now. Before I get into the logistical part of things, I just want to invite Carrie or Anne to say anything in closing, a few words if you guys would like to say anything before I move into the nuts and bolts.
No, because I think we need some housekeeping moving forward. I'm honored to still be a part of this. Thank you so much. The word that I heard a couple of times when I was walking around the room was ethics. And that plays into what Deb said and what you all said, is that the ethical farmer. And I think that that's important. And so thank you all for being here. And I know you all are hungry, so I'm going to let Anne take it from here. And all right, my friend, it's all you.
I just, again, want to thank you all for your authenticity and your willingness to come and be a part of the conversation here today in this room, but also what you're going to be doing in the roundtables, because I think that's where we're going to be able to take what we've learned from here and take it to the next level out there.
Okay. The next part here is very critical. So, lunch is going to happen in a few minutes. And we're going to do the same thing we did yesterday, where we're going to ask you to leave and come back in. I'm going to ask you to try to come back in a little bit more expeditiously. This afternoon, what's going to happen is that this room is going to be divided up for our roundtable session. So you see these tracks on the ceilings. The hotel staff needs to put up these air walls for us to have individual spaces for those roundtable sessions to happen, and they can't do that while we're in here eating, and so we just need to make sure that we're a little bit conscientious about time and get seated for lunch so that we can enjoy our lunch and then give them the time and space that they need to reset for us. Our herd fellows, where are the tables, Ariel? So there are some tables here at the front that are designated for our herd fellows. And if you are a speaker and have offered to sit at one of these tables with those fellows, would you please make sure that you come back in to sit at these tables for lunch? The book signing will happen today at 1:15 to 1:45. We have some amazing authors in this room, and it's critical to support their work by purchasing their books, and how cool to get them to sign it. So the bookstore is in the back corner over here. If you haven't visited it already, that's a perfect opportunity to do that. You're also supporting a locally owned bookstore, which is an endangered species. So please consider doing that. When the book signing is done, as I mentioned, these rooms will be reset. and our roundtable sessions will begin. So this year, rather than having everybody sign up for a roundtable, we're just going to do it on a first come, first seated basis. So please have in mind where you'd like to go and make sure you show up there on time. If the room is full, we're going to ask you to move to whatever is your second choice. And hopefully this will all just work out beautifully and everyone will be able to be engaged in a really excellent conversation. Really, I don't think you can go wrong in terms of which roundtable you go to, but just know that that's how it's going to work. We'll have a short break between each of the roundtables. The roundtables will repeat. So the first 9 that are happening will also be the second 9 that are happening. So you'll get to go to 2 of them. Are there any quick questions about that? Because if you have it, probably everybody else does.